I09 presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Brought to you by Brilliance Audio. And here are your hosts, John Joseph Adams and David Barr Kirkman.
Hello, and welcome to episode 25 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hi, this is John Joseph Adams. I'm the editor of Lightspeed and Fantasy magazines, and I've also edited several anthologies such as The Living Dead and The Living Dead 2, and Wastelands and some others.
And I'm David Barr Kirtley. My short fiction appears in books such as New Voices in Science Fiction and Fantasy the Best of the Year. And my most recent stories are Cats in Victory in Lightspeed, The Skullface City in The Living Dead 2, and Family Tree in The Way of the Wizard. And today on the show we'll be interviewing Robert Kirkman, who wrote the graphic novel series The Walking Dead, which is now a new hit series on AMC. And AMC just announced that they've picked up the show for a second season of 13 episodes. According to their press release, since debuting on Halloween, The Walking Dead has broken ratings records, with the series reaching more adults 18 to 49 than any other show in the history of cable television. So we'll be talking to Robert Kirkman about his various graphic novel projects and about the new show, and stick around after the interview. John and I'll be talking about some zombie stuff that we've watched recently, including The Walking Dead TV series.
And actually, if you enjoy this episode and you haven't gotten enough zombie talk after listening to the whole episode, we're going to be re-syndicating all of our old episodes that originally aired at Tor.com here on I09, starting next week. And so the first episode that we aired on Tor.com was an interview with Chet Falasek, who's the lead game designer on Left 4 Dead. And so that whole episode is about zombies and the apocalypse and whatnot. So, if you enjoy this episode and you want more, you can go listen to that one, and that'll be up next week. And, keep in mind that it's, it's not quite as polished. It was our first episode. It was our first attempt at a podcast. But Dave re-edited it, and so it's like the director's cut. So even if you did listen to it, you should listen to it again next week. Okay, so let's get Robert Kirkman on the phone.
Hello?
Hi, this is Dave and John from Geek's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hey, it's Robert Kirkman. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Okay, so The Walking Dead puts just as much emphasis on survival as it does on battling zombies. Why did you decide to focus so much on the survival aspect?
I guess at my core, I'm just a big girl that likes soap operas. So the real things that I enjoy, the parts of the comic that I really kind of really like writing, are the emotional bits, the relationship stuff, the interaction between Rick and Carl, and all that stuff, and the zombies are really just to trick dudes into reading it is basically what it boils down to.
Could you talk about how much thought do you put into just the survival? Like, do you study survivalism or anything like that?
No, I have no studies in survivalism. I Google enough to make it somehow seem realistic. When I, have to have someone dress a wound, or if there's anything going on. One of the things I most like to do in the book is make things up in a way that seems realistic. There's in particular, there's one scene where a guy dresses a wound, and I had friends that were like, "Wow, look at you, doing your research. That's amazing." But I really made up half of what the guy does just because I thought it seemed realistic and seemed cool. Because most of the times when I do research, I end up with things that aren't really exciting. Like, oh, that's a really simple way to do that. Like, oh, you clean a wound by washing it out with water. That's dull. So I did something with tea leaves and wax, and I got a letter in from a guy that said that would actually cause his leg to get infected, and he would get that amputated. But it seems like a nice realistic thing when you're reading the comic, and then to counteract how fake it is, I just don't print that guy's letter. So that's how I do that.
So it's important that people shouldn't use The Walking Dead as a reference for medical school or whatever?
Oh, please, Lord, don't anyone do anything from this comic book thinking that it actually works. So that's not, please don't. I don't want to be responsible for somebody getting their leg cut off. Again.
Okay, so The Walking Dead, it's very convincing in the way that it portrays the strained emotions of the characters. Do you have any tricks for putting yourself inside their heads, and did you do any research into that, into disaster psychology or anything like that?
Well, I mean, I know a lot of troubled people, so that helps. But, a lot of times it's just thinking about what I would do in that situation and doing the opposite, or thinking about what I would do in that situation if I were a crazy person. I use myself a lot as a frame of reference, but I don't always, if I always just kind of put myself in that situation and did what I would do, everyone would behave the same way. So it's really just a matter of, changing things up as best you can and trying to keep things believable. And then, the other thing I do is I try to map out how characters react to certain things and how their reactions are going to change over time based on other things they've experienced. So you'll see a character like Glenn react a certain way in the early issues, but as he has gone through those experiences and has learned over time, his reactions will vary later on in the series.
So a prison seems like a natural setting for a zombie story, but The Walking Dead was, I think, the first time I'd ever seen that done. How did you get the idea to have your characters take refuge in a prison, and what sort of benefits or drawbacks were there to using that as a setting?
It kind of came out of the blue. It wasn't really like a hard, study that I put in to decide whether it was going to be a prison or it was originally going to be a high school, because the high school I attended had a courtyard in the center of it. It was a building basically shaped like an O, and I was going to base the high school in the comic book based on, I was going to base it on that, because, the courtyard would be a place where they could actually, grow food and have like a little outside area that was completely protected. And then it occurred to me that high schools don't really have beds, and you would basically like, as I was writing, I was like, they'll go in and they'll take the principal's couch, and then when they're going to fight over that, they're all going to be sleeping on the floor. This is awful. There's like one room with showers in the gym, but that's not good. And then it occurred to me that prisons and high schools are pretty much exactly the same, except for you're supposed to sleep in a prison. So that seems like a more ideal thing for this story. They would have more things to actually live off of inside the prison, and it would be, already well fortified. So it seems like a natural fit. It is kind of odd to think that, they haven't really set a story like this in a prison before.
Have you spent a lot of time in prison yourself?
I don't really like to talk about that period in my life, but yes. No, I've never even set foot in a prison. That's why the prison is completely 100% inaccurate and made up.
How did the Walking Dead TV show come about, and what was the development process like?
It's funny because the development process was very long and drawn out and very quick at the same time, because there was kind of a false start where Frank Darabont contacted me because he had a deal with NBC and wanted to do a pilot and was going to make that pilot The Walking Dead, and it almost actually happened at NBC in 2005. But that fell through because NBC decided they didn't want zombies to be in the show after the script. Which is a funny story that he likes to tell, so I feel okay in telling it. But it kind of went into limbo after that, and there was some interest here and there, but nothing ever really came together. And then about 18 months ago, Frank contacted me again and said, "What do you think about AMC?" And I said, "Well, I love me some Breaking Bad and some Mad Men, so I'm quite keen on AMC." And he was telling me that they were interested, and Gaylan Hurd had been brought in somewhere along the way, and she kind of got everything back on track and brought AMC to the table and made it happen. And so 18 months ago we started out on this, and now there's a show that's going to be on air in a week. So it was really kind of a unusually fast process from that point on.
So how involved have you been in the production?
Fairly involved. I've gone out to the writer's room a few times and spent, a week here and a week there working with them. And then I actually wrote the 4th episode. So fairly involved. I'm an executive producer. I could fire Frank Darabont if I wanted to. I couldn't really. But I don't know, maybe I could. I should call someone at AMC. I don't really know. But I've been on set a bunch. I was there. I was making sure. I mean, my job to me is to make sure that the show is awesome, just because I feel like the people that read the comic book and like the comic book deserve the television show to not suck. And so I always wanted to have a hand in it, just to make sure that everything was good for them, just because I feel like I owe them. And thankfully I haven't really had to do much, because Frank and everybody involved, they were also out to do an awesome show. And their version of awesome is the same version as mine, and the show turned out to be pretty great.
So what kind of changes should fans of the comic be expecting to see on the show?
Well, Rick is a duck. And they all live in a spaceship. There's some cool characters that I kind of wish were in the comic book. Merle and Daryl Dixon are pretty awesome, and they're wholly original to the television series. And there's other characters like T-Dog and Morales and Jackie that you're not going to recognize from the comic because they're not in it. But they're, welcome additions, and they bring a lot to the show, and there's cool stuff going on, and there's little storylines here and there that, kind of crop up and aren't from the comic book, but they fit seamlessly into, what the comic book has always been about. And if you have a poor memory, you may not remember that they're not in the comic book, and so they don't really stick out in that respect. But, there's a lot of things that Frank did that I'm just jealous of, where he would take a scene and add to it, where he would read the comic book and go, oh, you know what, Kirkman, that was a cool couple of pages, but I'm going to do this with it. And it's so obvious and awesome. Like, I look back and I'm like, why didn't I do that to begin with? Like, what the hell's wrong with me? So, there's a lot of things like that just kind of piss me off. So I'm a little bitter about the show.
So one recent issue of The Walking Dead featured a color story by Ryan Ottley. How did that come about?
Well, one of the most frustrating things about the Walking Dead series is that since day one, when I wrote a text piece in the back of the first issue about how, I'd planned for this series to go on for years, and I didn't, it was the zombie movie that never ends, and yada, 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 I started getting letters from people that would say, well, the third issue is pretty good, and I like these 3 issues, but I just don't see how you're going to get this to be interesting for a year. Or, I like when issue 10 would come out, it'd be like, it's been pretty good for 10 issues, but I don't see how you're going to keep this story interesting, because it just seems like this is going to become repetitive and mundane, and you're not going to be able to keep this thing going. It seems like you're going to run out of ideas. And so I would start jokingly replying that, I'm fully aware that I'm going to run out of ideas. I'm clocking that I will probably run out of ideas by around issue 75. And at that point, I'm not going to stop the book because I'm a sellout. I'm just going to add aliens into the book to make it more interesting. And that'll be my jumping the shark moment. And the book will be, swiftly canceled after that. But for a time, there will be aliens in the book. And it was all a big joke. And at the time, issue 3, issue 10, issue 12, issue 75 seemed really far away, and it seemed like, I may never make it to that. I mean, we'll see. Who knows? And so when it came time, and it was something that came up in the letters column a lot. Like, people would respond and be like, oh, I'm going to read this book until issue 75 when the aliens come, and then I'm going to quit. And so I feel like, the hardcore fans, the people that actually read the letters column, were very acutely aware that issue 75 was coming, and I didn't want to just not do anything. But I wasn't actually going to put aliens in the book, and so I thought it would be fun to do an out-of-continuity backup story that was kind of a fun gag that played off of the aliens in issue 75 joke that had been running through the letters column for, nearly 75 issues. And, much to my dismay, some fans thought that it was in continuity. And so I got some letters from people who had never read the letters column, who hadn't even read the letters column in that issue, where it talks about how the story is just a gag, who thought that I had somehow decided that the book was in color now and drawn by Ryan Ottley now and featured aliens and science fiction weaponry and stuff. I don't know. There wasn't that many people that thought that, so I think most people just thought it was a funny gag. But I sure had a lot of fun doing it. It's kind of fun to write the characters in a different way, and seeing Michonne with a lightsaber is pretty awesome.
So it was recently announced that you'll be doing some Walking Dead novels co-written with novelist Jay Bonansinga. What can you tell us about those?
The novels will basically be some expanded backstory for the comic book series. So they'll take place in the comic book continuity. And I don't really want to say who the first one is about just yet, but it's basically really awesome characters from the comic book series that aren't in the comic book series anymore. So it's people that have, they've died. But, it's like fan favorites that people kind of want to know more about. And so we're going to be telling kind of a really cool history of this character and how they came to the point where they were at when we met them in the comic book series.
So in recent years, all sorts of new variations on zombies have appeared. Fast zombies, zombie romance, zombie superheroes. What's been your take on all of this?
The more the better. I actually like it. Zombie superheroes, I guess I was kind of a part of that. But yeah, I'm all for it. Zombie romance sounds a little gross. But, I like zombies, and as long as it's good, I don't care if there's a zombie cooking show as long as it's entertaining. I'm certainly not a zombie purist that, can't stand running zombies. They're not right for The Walking Dead. I mean, that's not what that show or the comic book is about. But, I really like the Dawn of the Dead remake. It's a really cool movie, and the fast zombies don't really bug me. It's ridiculous that they're busting through walls and stuff. Don't get me wrong, but it works for that movie. And so, I don't really have a problem with it. It's better than vampires, right?
So do you think that the zombies, as we've seen them in The Walking Dead, is that the sort of Romero-style zombies, is that what Walking Dead is always going to be, or will there ever be any kind of other supernatural sort of elements introduced further down the road, do you think?
No supernatural elements. I mean, I swear. While I do think zombies of different variations are, very cool, I don't think that, they're cool for The Walking Dead. So the classic Romero zombies that we have now are not going to change very much. Now, we see in the comic book series that there are different things that happen to a zombie over time. In the comic book series, they've encountered some that have grown a little bit more lethargic and aren't quite as threatening as fresher zombies. But anything, they're not going to be sprouting wings anytime soon, basically. Although that is a pretty good idea.
So your short story "Alone Together" appears in my anthology, The Living Dead 2. What was the process?
We got to plug your anthology. Blah blah.
Yes, we do. So, what was the process writing that story like, and how is writing a short story different from writing a comic book?
And don't worry, we only have 10 questions on this subject, so.
No, it's a very good anthology. Everyone should run out and buy it. It's the one with the blue cover. It's funny, I was actually in a bookstore waiting in line, and someone in another line across from the register was actually buying that book. And I thought that was really cool. I didn't say anything to them because I'm actually quite shy. But anyway, it's very different because when I'm writing a comic book, I can go, "Hey, Charlie, do something cool. They're saying this." And he turns it into an awesome panel, and people read it, and they think, "Oh, that Robert Kirkman guy is a great writer because he, told Charlie to draw something cool." Like, I didn't really do crap. So, comic writing is much easier. And then when you sit down to write prose, it's funny, that's actually the first prose I've written since high school, just because I've been busy, damn it. But it's work. It's hard, because you have to take words and actually make them read well, I guess. So there's a reason J. Bonansinga is working on the Walking Dead novels with me. I think it's a pain in the ass, but I had a lot of fun with it, and it's a good story. People should buy those books, right? It's a good story, right?
I agree.
No, it's great.
Well, hey, I put it first in the book, so obviously I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, what's up with that?
So how did you first break into writing comic books?
I did a comic book and I published it myself. Yeah, I was lucky enough to meet Tony Moore in 7th grade, and so I knew that guy and was able to trick him into drawing comic books only at a very young age. So shortly after high school, the two of us started working on a book called Battle Pope, and then from that I started a publishing company called Funkatron. And I published that starting in June of 2000, and then did that book for about 2 years before I started getting work at Image Comics, and the rest is history.
So, how difficult was it doing that, publishing your own comic book and starting from the ground up?
In a lot of ways it was easy, just because there's not a lot of moving parts. In comics, there's, one distributor that distributes to all the comic book stores in the country, and there was a printer that was in Canada that most people used. And so I would, work with Tony Moore to make the comic book. We would send that to Canada, and then that would be sent from the printer in Canada to the one distributor, and then it would go to comic book stores. So, once you get that system down, it's really a fairly easy process. But, there's a lot of troublesome financing stuff that came into it, and then, the actual production of a comic book is not something that people just know off the top of their heads. What kind of paper to draw your pages on and how you make the word balloons and, different things that have to be done in order to turn a bunch of pieces of paper into a comic book, or things that I kind of had to teach myself. But it was a lot of fun, and, it seemed to lead to something, but it was it's a very, very hard time in my life. I know that by the time I actually started making money in comics, I was about $50,000 in debt. And by making money in comics, I mean I started making about $500 a year. So there were some tough times along the way, but in the end, it all worked out, swimmingly. I couldn't be happier.
What advice would you have for aspiring comic book artists and writers today?
Give up. No, I mean, one thing that is much more prominent now than it was when I was starting out is the internet. So people these days could do exactly what I did, and instead of, losing money by getting it all printed up and distributed and stuff, they could actually just put it online, and that's, mostly free if you teach yourself how to do it. And, spread the word through message boards that your website is there. And, I mean, that's really the way I would recommend it. It's also easier if you're better. The better you are, the easier it is to break in, which I know sounds simple, but it's really hard to recognize if you're not good. If you can recognize that you're not good, that's really important, because if you're not good, you can either give up or get better. And, if you think you're great, you're probably not going to get better, and then it's never going to happen. Unless you actually are great, and then it's going to be easy. You'll probably have to play that back a couple times to get it, but
So what do you think about the current state of the comic book industry, and are there any changes you'd like to see made?
Sure, there's tons of changes. On one end, I like it. I think it's, it's cool. There's good comics being made, and everybody's having a good time. On the other hand, it frustrates me that most people, it's hard to do creator-owned material. I understand that, but I wish that people were taking more risks with comics and doing more creator-owned stuff, and not simply just working for Marvel and DC. I mean, that's a main frustration that I have. Also, I wish that, the books at Marvel and DC were better, but, whatever. There's a lot of good books coming out from them, so I don't really, probably shouldn't really complain about that. But, I don't know, there's a lot of things that could be, that you could complain about. But I'm actually really optimistic, just because as we move into the digital era, I think that, the problems that we've had with distribution and getting books out to a larger audience are going to go away. And, as we start to reach a larger audience, we're not going to be selling comic books to the same people we've been selling comic books to for, the last 20 years. And so we're not going to be trying to sell original material to an audience that's predisposed to, keeping their runs of, Daredevil intact. And so, hopefully we'll be finding people that are more open to create their own stuff and new ideas, and that'll make for a better comic book industry, because, people will be, doing more original stuff. And I think more original stuff is really what we need.
And you've talked particularly about the comic book industry not doing enough to appeal to younger readers.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing with, mainstream comics catering to a fan base that is aging. They have, kind of lost a younger audience. And so I wish that, more people were doing books for a younger audience. And I'm happy to say that, I am working on a number of books that are for all ages, and I'll be rolling out soon. So I'm going to try and, fix that problem instead of just complaining about it. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad that, if someone, my son, for instance, if he were to, see a Wolverine cartoon and want to read a Wolverine comic, that's a very hard thing for him to do. The trade paperbacks in bookstores are kind of a convoluted mess. It's not like Mango, where you can go, hey, here's volume 1 and here's volume 37. If you go to buy Wolverine, there's 35 different trades with different names, and it's hard to figure out where to begin. I just wish that things were set up more for a wider audience and appeal to a wider audience more.
Well, yeah, and could you talk about some of the books that you've worked on besides The Walking Dead, and which of them would you most recommend to readers who are new to your work?
Well, I do another book called Invincible, which is a superhero title. It's kind of everything I've ever liked about superhero comics, kind of boiled down and put into one comic book. It's a universe-spanning superhero tale that you can get in, pretty much one series. It's also been running as long as The Walking Dead, so it's, rapidly approaching issue 80. So that's kind of cool. And there's, trade paperbacks available and stuff. The premise is that Omni-Man is the premier superhero of the world, and Invincible is his son, who has just reached puberty and gotten superpowers. And Omni-Man, his son thought that he was this alien from another planet that came to help Earth, but it turns out he is there to conquer Earth. And Invincible and he are at odds. And so he ends up having to fight his father, and that happens very early on in the run. So there's a lot more story that happens after that. And then I do another book called The Astounding Wolfman, that is about a werewolf superhero that has recently come to an end. I decided to end that with issue 25 so that I could focus on some newer projects. And I think there will be 4 trade paperbacks available for that. It's what I do with Jason Howard. It's very cool. I co-created another book with Todd McFarlane called Haunt. That is kind of a espionage book with a supernatural ghost element added in. It's about a secret agent who dies, and then his brother, who is a priest, is able to see him and interact with him as a ghost. And together they're able to form, a super secret agent that's got ghost powers called Haunt. So it's a lot of fun. People should try it.
So are there any other recent or upcoming projects that you'd like to mention?
I have a new imprint at Image Comics called Skybound, which is basically my corner of Image Comics where I get to do whatever I want and, kind of bring new books into the fold and shepherd them out into the audience. And one of the first books that we're doing under that imprint is called Witch Doctor, which I'm very excited about. It's about a scientist who basically uses scientific theory and medical know-how to combat supernatural things, werewolves, vampires, monsters from other dimensions, with science. And so it's a very realistic take on a supernatural story. And that's written by a new writer by the name of Brandon Seifert and an artist named Lucas Kettner, who are doing this thing. And it's probably one of the smartest comic books I've ever read. And that'll be coming out probably, I want to say March or April of 2011. We're still trying to nail down those dates. But yeah, I think it's going to turn a lot of heads, and it's definitely a unique story. It's got horror elements, but it's a realistic take on that stuff, which I think is really cool.
Great. Okay, so John, was there anything else you wanted to ask?
No, I don't know. Nothing really comes to mind.
It's called The Living Dead 2.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say, can we talk some more about how awesome The Living Dead 2 is?
It's absolutely amazing. Great book.
Well, thank you. I mean, I don't know if you were just jokingly saying that to appease my ego or if you really mean it, but thanks anyway.
No, I wouldn't have agreed to pen it if I didn't like the first one. And
sure.
I almost think the second one is better, but not because my story is in there.
Right.
I swear.
Well, it's nice of you to say. I mean, I'm glad you think so. I mean, actually, a lot of people have also mentioned that, and I'm like hugely flattered to hear that, just because The Living Dead, collected so much of like the classic stuff that bringing in all this newer stuff was quite a challenge to follow that up. But
well, anytime I can read a new zombie story written by Bob Fingerman, I'm totally on board.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Well, I'm sure he'll be thrilled to hear that.
Actually, I mean, one thing that really struck me, is that The Walking Dead is so grim, and in interviews you're so funny. I mean, do you have any?
I put it all on the page. It's weird for me too. I don't know. I get a lot of people that meet me and they're like, "Wow, I expected you to be more depressed." But no, I mean, I don't know. I think I have a good life. I have healthy children and a friendly wife, and things seem to be going well. And I don't know where the shit in Walking Dead comes from, to be honest. But
Are any of your other books that you do, are they humor? Do you do any, humor writing?
Well, books I've done in the past have been, have had kind of a humorous slant. My first book, Battledope, was obviously, comedy, but those books didn't do well, and so I stopped. Actually, my most successful book is The Walking Dead, which is depressing as hell. So I think after having a few comedy books that fail and then having a depressing book that is kind of a hit, it kind of tells me that the audience is sad.
So how do you think you would fare in a zombie apocalypse situation? Like, would you be one of the first to die, or do you think you'd do all right?
Oh, I would be one of the first to die. People are like, oh, but you wrote that big comic, and you must think about how things would go, and you've probably got plans, right? And no, I know a zombie apocalypse isn't really going to happen, but even if there was any kind of end of the world kind of thing that happened, I would be the first one jumping off a building. I mean, I love my kids. I try and protect my wife and kids and stuff, but especially if they were already gone, I'd be out the door. I mean, it's just not something I want to live through, and I'm a big giant sissy, and so I'm not going to be able to get through any of that stuff, and I would be the first to kill myself. See, that's depressing, right?
I was going to say, that's a good happy note to end the interview on.
And that was our interview. So thanks so much to Robert Kirkman for joining us on the show. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back to talk more about zombies after this word from our sponsor.
New from Brilliance Audio, Kill the Dead by Richard Kadrey. James Stark, a.k.a. Sandman Slim, crawled out of hell, took bloody revenge for his girlfriend's murder, and saved the world along the way. After that, what do you do for an encore? You take a lousy job tracking down monsters for money. It's a depressing gig, but it pays for your beer and cigarettes. But in LA, things can always get worse. Like when Lucifer comes to town to supervise his movie biography and drafts Stark as his bodyguard. Sandman Slim has to swim with the human and inhuman sharks of LA's underground power elite. That's before the murders start. And before he runs into the Czech porn star who isn't quite what she seems. Even before all those murdered people start coming back from the dead and join a zombie army that will change our world and Stark's forever. Death bites. Life is worse. All things considered, hell's not looking so bad. An unabridged recording of Kill the Dead by Richard Kadrey, narrated by McLeod Andrews, available now from Brilliance Audio and wherever audiobooks are sold.
And we're back. All right, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is this British zombie miniseries called Dead Set that John and I just watched with a couple friends. It sounded like it was going to be horrible. The premise is that zombies invade during the filming of the reality show Big Brother. And so the people in the Big Brother house, are like among the last survivors because they're in this enclosed space and they don't even realize at first that zombies have attacked. It just sounds dreadful, but I think we all pretty much, everyone who came, ended up enjoying it a lot.
I really enjoyed it. I mean, it had a lot of good zombie mayhem. I think it sort of started off a little slow because it's got a lot of the Big Brother stuff, before the zombies actually start attacking. But as it progresses, it gets progressively more zombie-rific. I mean, it's like it does a lot of zombie stuff really well, and it's really pretty gruesome and horrifying at certain points. But it hits all the right notes for zombie entertainment, I think, and I was really pleased with it. I guess my biggest complaint is that we needed the subtitles kind of because the British accents were really hard to understand sometimes.
Yeah, no, some of those accents were really, really strange, and they use sort of unfamiliar slang and stuff too. And we had Jordan was there with us, and her dad's British, so we were kind of like, hey Jordan, translate that for us. But even she had no idea what they were saying. So yeah, we did actually have to turn the subtitles on. But actually, once the zombies really started killing people, we were able to turn the subtitles off again because at that point it doesn't make that much difference. The characters are all just saying oh, don't kill me, blah. Although, as you were saying, right, the subtitles did kind of spoil some of the surprises because it would say, zombie, groans, a second or two before the zombie actually, appeared on screen. But I've never actually watched Big Brother, let alone the UK Big Brother. So I don't know if there was anything I was missing. Some people were saying that, you could recognize some of the former cast members sort of had cameo appearances.
I guess sort of the host of the show or whatever, it was in it too, right? I mean, the woman who talked to the people in the house. she was in there too, and she turned into a zombie and gets killed at some point.
So how did we end up watching this? Like, because you had heard it was good, right?
Well, I heard about it a long time ago. I think when it first aired in the UK, I think about a year ago. And I actually, the copy that we watched, I got a British edition. We watched on the, region-free DVD player because, at the time, I didn't know that it was going to be ever coming over here because it didn't seem to be. It didn't seem to be forthcoming. And so, I got a copy, and I'd never gotten around to watching it. But I'd heard from a variety of sources that it was very good, and then so recently, Dave and I, we did this zombie event in New York, for my anthology, The Living Dead 2, and one of the other contributors, Bob Fingerman, he was talking about how, Bob Fingerman, Kirkman mentioned him in the interview there, but Bob had mentioned how good Dead Set was, and he and Dave Wellington, another contributor, they both had seen it, and they both were really raving about how great it was. So that just sort of reinforced the idea that I should probably watch that since I bought it and everything. But and actually AMC actually just aired it on cable the week before Walking Dead premiered. So it was sort of like their lead-in to Walking Dead and part of their like Halloween festivities. So I mean that's what brought it up.
I mean, I thought it was really interesting how they made it. It was like zombies invade Big Brother. It was like really Big Brother. It wasn't like some made up show.
Yeah, I thought that was cool too. Like, I mean, I found I couldn't see an American produced series doing that. Like, just because I don't know. It seems like anytime anyone's ever done anything like this, it's like never the actual property involved. In like books too. Like I know, like Brian Keene actually has this novel called Castaways that's about Survivor, the TV show Survivor, but on the show, like, there's monsters on the island or something. And it goes from there. And it's actually really good. And as a fan of the show Survivor, I actually really enjoyed the book because it's like obviously Survivor. And I mean, I don't know if his publisher made him change it or if he just, he didn't call it Survivor on purpose or whatever, but it was so thinly veiled it didn't matter. It's like obviously this is like the same show. But yeah, no, it was nice. It was nice in Dead Set to actually just have it be Big Brother and not have that facade of some other show.
I mean, there's the part where sort of as the miniseries starts, one of the characters is being evicted from the house, sort of like voted off the show, and she comes out, and so she comes out of the house, and there's this huge crowd there cheering for her, and I was kind of watching that, I was like, wow, that is a lot of extras, But then I was just reading that actually what they did is that was actually the audience that was there for the actual eviction on Big Brother, and they just had her, had her come out, and they filmed that, just before the actual person came out, so they just took advantage of that whole set and crowd and everything.
Oh, that's awesome.
But yeah, and so I thought it was kind of cool that this was, it really did follow the George Romero formula, that you have, zombies attack, and there's a small group of survivors, and they try various things, and there's sort of dissension within the group, and and they sort of die one by one, and it was all, I mean, it wasn't like groundbreaking or anything, but it was just all really just well done.
What I thought was really interesting is something that you brought up when we were watching it is this takes place in the UK, and so somebody shows up with a gun, and you're like, where did she get a gun from? And I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe she just had the gun, and they're like, not the UK. It's like they don't just let everybody who wants a gun own a gun. That's crazy.
But I mean, one thing that kind of drives me a little bit crazy about the Romero sort of formula is that there's always just one really, really obnoxious person who just like refuses to see sense, and just their arguments make no sense, and they just yell for no reason. And I mean, I guess that's kind of, his theme is that people can't put their differences aside and deal constructively with each other, even in the most horrible circumstances where they would need to do that. But it's still, there's always like one character in all the Romero movies who you just hate. I'm just, oh God, shut up. And so like in Night of the Living Dead, it's the guy with his daughter in the basement and so on. And so they did the exact same thing in this one. But in this one, it was kind of, it didn't bother me so much because, I mean, the guy was just so obnoxious. This is the sort of director of the TV show. But he was obnoxious in a way that was actually really fun to watch, so it didn't really bug me.
And plus it was so believable because he was like, oh, well, he's a director. He must be a dude, obviously. So. Although I have to say the part where he's stuck in the room with the one contestant and he has to shit in a bucket. It's like, oh, that's that was a bit too much. I didn't need to see that. It's like
that is a thing though, like that a lot of times in movies that they just kind of don't take into account like how are people going to the bathroom in these right. circumstances, and I do sort of wonder about that sometimes. Like I always sort of wondered when you watch like Star Wars, even when Luke Skywalker is like in his X-wing, flying from one planet to the other. I was like, is there a bathroom in that thing? Like, what? How does that work? But when you hear it sort of like zombies attack a reality TV set, you know, there's just like so many obvious jokes that you expect them to do and just make it really campy and dumb. And for the most part, it wasn't like that. It was very serious and dramatic. And I was really impressed by how straight they were able to play it, given the sort of premise that kind of invites dumb jokes. You know, there was stuff like somebody quotes, Dawn of the Dead. In Dawn of the Dead, the zombies besiege this shopping mall, and somebody wonders, like, why are they all coming here to the mall? And somebody says, oh, well, this was like they come to a place that had the most meaning for them in life, that was like their church. And somebody sort of paraphrases that in this, you know, sort of making the same kind of judgment about reality TV fans. And the only other thing that really kind of bugged me about it was that there were a lot of instances of characters just doing stupid things. Mm-hmm. Where, you know, everyone's just screaming at the TV, like, why are you doing this? It makes no sense. You're gonna die if you do this. I guess realistically, you know, you sort of expect ordinary people kind of to do stupid things, and especially like reality TV contestants, you know, are probably not, you know, gonna be the best at surviving a zombie invasion. But it's just not that entertaining for me to watch characters dying because they did something really, really stupid. Mm-hmm. And I thought in the Dawn of the Dead remake, it was really good how you have kind of two factions, where there's the kind of like, let's stay in the mall because it's safe here faction, and the like, let's get on a boat and sail away to an island faction. Mm-hmm. And they both make reasonable arguments, and you're like, wow, I'm not really sure what they should do or what I would do in this situation. And I find that a lot more dramatic and entertaining than, you know, if one side is obviously saying what makes sense and the other side is just saying something crazy and stupid. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of, I didn't really like that in this, where like when the director, when he wants to leave the studio, there's just like there's no logic to it at all. It's just completely, you know, like a plot device to get everybody killed by zombies, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh, you know, speaking of the annoying guy in Night of the Living Dead, that just reminded me, you know, we should probably mention Night of the Living Dead Reanimated. Basically, they got a bunch of animators and artists from all over the world to collaborate and like sort of animate different parts of Night of the Living Dead. So it's like you're watching an animated version of Night of the Living Dead with all the original voice acting and whatnot. But it's like just this blend of different styles and everything. It's pretty interesting to watch. I mean, it's quite unusual. So I mean, it's not going to be to everyone's taste, but. You know, Dave and I actually we did a zombie event associated with that as well, and so like they recorded our panel. It was like Dave and I and Jonathan Mayberry and Kim Paffenroth, and then a couple of the guys who were associated with the production. And so they recorded this panel that we did that was just talking all about zombies, and so it's actually on the DVD as an extra. So if anybody wants to see, you know, Dave and I talk more about zombies, even more so than this episode and our first episode, you know, there's that whole panel that you could watch on the DVD. But also you can see Night of the Living Dead Reanimated, which is pretty cool. And,
you know, and John was mentioning this, the zombie panel we did, you know, with Bob Fingerman and David Wellington and others in New York. And when we were at that, some people came up, you know, people in the audience came up afterward and asked if we had seen this French zombie movie called The Horde. And a couple of different people mentioned it and said it was really good. And we've been trying to get our hands on a copy and have not managed to procure one.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's just not coming out on DVD here until sometime in December. And so it's just a little bit bad timing for this particular episode. So we couldn't watch it to talk about it beforehand.
But if anyone's listening to this in France, you know, check that out. And if anyone's seen it, you know, let us know what you thought of it. We're really curious to see it.
Oh, and another thing to look for, too, is... there's this YouTube video called Chainsaw Made. It's this claymation, gloriously violent, you know, just sort of zombie apocalypse thing. It's like less than 10 minutes long, but I mean, it's totally awesome. I mean, it's like so violent and it's just hilarious. And it's like, it must have taken them like 10 years to make it or something. But I mean, it's like so worth it. I mean, it's just like really, really great. And so you can just go check that out. Just Google Chainsaw Made and you know, you can find it. But then they also just came out with a sequel to it too. So Chainsaw Made 2 is now also available. You know, actually, another zombie event I did, there was this thing called Zombie Fest in Pittsburgh, actually in the mall where Dawn of the Dead was filmed. So that was kind of cool. But that was like in 2008. So I was there for that. they sort of had like tables stationed throughout the mall, and so I was sitting there at my table with The Living Dead, and but I also had my laptop with me, and so I just played Chainsaw Maid like on the loop, so that when people were walking by, they'd see this ridiculously violent claymation thing, and I mean you can't look away. I mean it's like it just catches your eye, and you're like, oh my god, what is going on here?
All right, and so now John and I are going to talk about The Walking Dead on AMC, and we have not talked about this at all, so who knows what's going to happen. I don't know, I don't know what John thinks. We'll find out. So episode 1, Days Gone By. John, what did you think?
Oh, well, I mean, I thought it was pretty awesome. It was actually a little slower paced than I thought it would be, but I mean, I think by the end of the episode, it was pretty great. I think the casting is all pretty good. It followed the opening of the comic book pretty well, from what I recall. I mean, certainly, the protagonist Rick Grimes, he wakes up in this hospital after having been shot. And so he's been in the hospital for a while, and he doesn't know what's happened when he wakes up, and he's all by himself in this hospital. So, but I thought they did something really cool in that first sequence where you see Rick in the hospital. It's like they sort of have him have this sort of fever dream of him remembering one of his friends coming to visit him in the hospital, and he goes to answer them, but he was like in a coma or something the whole time, and so like he answers them, but he answers them like weeks or months later, and so he sees the flowers that were that his friend brought and put on his table beside his bed, only now they're all dead, and they've been long dead. So I thought that was a really clever sort of visual trick, just to show that all this time has passed, and to convey that he has this sort of sense of temporal dislocation going on because he was in this coma.
Yeah, I mean, do we know how much time has passed? Because that's something I've sort of wondered about, particularly when we get to the second episode, but
no, I don't know. I don't remember if we find out in the book. I don't remember if that's made clear. In the show, it certainly doesn't seem to be clear to me anyway how long he was in that coma, because I mean certainly the whole world has basically collapsed since he gets out of the hospital, and his wife has already basically given him up for dead. It seems like it's hard to say, but I assume weeks or months later. Yeah, there's just not enough evidence to actually, come to any conclusion as to how long it actually has been.
Okay, I mean, one thing I want to mention is I saw some criticism online. This was actually of the graphic novel, but people were saying, oh, they totally ripped that off from 28 Days Later, where he wakes up in the hospital, Right. And I just want to point out that anyone who says this should look up a little novel called Day of the Triffids.
Right.
Because this all goes back to that. And this is a great book. I mean, you should look it up anyway.
Yeah.
But it's sort of a classic of sort of post-disaster fiction. In that book, some number of years in the past, these mysterious things called Triffids had started appearing, which are these sort of giant ambulatory carnivorous plants. And they're really dangerous, but people are kind of able to keep them under control, and they harvest oil from them. And so our hero is a guy who sort of handles Triffids, and as the story opens, he's been blinded in a lab accident involving Triffid venom, and so he's in the hospital with bandages over his eyes, and there's some amazing meteor shower in the sky, and so everybody all over the world is just out staring at this amazing meteor shower. And then the next day, it turns out that everyone who stared at this meteor shower has gone blind, and so our hero wakes up in the hospital and finds that he's one of the few people who can still see, and that the Triffids have broken loose and are just spreading everywhere. And it's just such a great way to kick off a sort of disaster story that lots of subsequent stories have copied that. And lots of people just do it as an homage, and 28 Days Later did, and The Walking Dead does too.
I also really liked when Rick finally gets to Atlanta and he's besieged by the horde of zombies, and he has to scramble for his life, and he ends up inside the tank and whatnot. I mean, that whole sequence was pretty great. I mean, and they just tear apart the horse. And
yeah, no, that was great when he rides around that corner and there's just like hundreds of zombies there. Yeah. Although they don't seem all that slow to me. I mean,
no, they are fairly fast. Yeah, that's true. I don't know that I ever got a really good idea in the comic, how fast or slow they were. I got the impression that they were fairly slow.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'd never thought of them as fast zombies when I was reading the comic. But in the show, they definitely do seem to like. They're not necessarily fast zombies, but they're at least as fast as regular people.
Mm-hmm.
Although in the book, in the comic, they do sort of decay over time, and so some of them they get less agile as they sort of age. I mean, it could be that that's what's happening in the show too. Is that these zombies are also still fairly fresh, and so that's why they're quite limber.
There was the one thing I didn't really like in that scene was where he crawls up into the tank, and then there's the soldier's body lying there, and he's just kind of like, I think I'll take this guy's gun. I'm sure he's not a zombie,
Yeah.
And it just seems, and of course the soldier opens his eyes, and you're like, ah! But it just seems like if you'd been through what he's just been through, that you would be just jumping at anything that even kind of looks like a human body,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, and it's like it is one of those situations where you're like, come on, dude, think. But I can understand how the writers would think, oh well, I mean, this guy, he still hasn't quite grasped it yet, he still hasn't quite gotten to the point where he's going to suspect every body, of being a possible zombie. I mean, it would be. I would hope that as the series goes on, that the characters don't continue to make mistakes like that.
Mm-hmm. My favorite part of this episode was actually where it's sort of cutting back and forth between Rick looking through the park for the sort of torso of the first zombie kind of he came across.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Morgan trying to shoot the zombie of his wife with the sniper rifle. I found that that sequence very intense and very powerful.
Yeah.
I guess also I kind of liked how uncompromising it was in a lot of ways. With right from the beginning he blows away this little girl,
Mm-hmm.
and there were some very emphatic headshots in this episode.
Yeah, I was really surprised at how graphic it was. I mean, it's got to be the most violent television show ever, right? I mean that's some hardcore violence right there. I mean, headshot after headshot. I mean, yeah, they're zombies, but still.
So yeah, episode 1.
Two thumbs up.
So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back to talk more about zombies after this word from our sponsor.
New from Brilliance Audio, The Zombies of Lake Wobegotten by Harrison Geeler. The town of Lake Wobegotten, Minnesota is a small town, filled with ordinary, yet above average, people, leading ordinary lives. Ordinary, that is, until the dead start coming back to life, with the intent to feast upon the living. Now this small town of above-average citizens must overcome their petty rivalries and hidden secrets in order to survive the onslaught of the dead. The Zombies of Lake Wobegotten by Harrison Geeler. Narrated by Phil Gigante. Available now from Brilliance Audio and wherever audiobooks are sold.
And we're back. All right, so episode 2. What'd you think of that one?
Yeah, I mean, I really liked that one too. I'd seen some commentary online that seemed to indicate that it wasn't that good, but I don't know, I thought it was quite good. Yeah, so I thought they did some really cool stuff in there. Like, I mean, at the sort of toward the end of the episode, they have to figure out a way to get away from the building that they're in and get to this truck, and so they realize the only way they're going to get there is to walk through the zombies, and so they talk about, like, well, how do the zombies know that we're human? And they discuss, well, there's noise, and they seem to see and smell and whatever, and so they come up with the idea of covering themselves in gore to make themselves smell like a zombie, so that the zombies won't know that they're living. And so speaking of the most violent television show ever, I mean, oh my God, I mean, that's got to be one of the most gruesome scenes ever, certainly. I mean, they take this zombie corpse from off the street and they bring it into the building, and they chop it up, and I mean, it's awful. I mean, one of the characters throws up as they're doing it, but I mean, it's like, I think some of the audience members might get a little sick as well. But as far as the rest of the episode, like, I mean, it sort of brings up what you were talking about earlier with the one unreasonable guy syndrome. Mm-hmm. I mean, in this episode we have that. Michael Rooker guest stars as a racist jerk. Well, let me rephrase, as a racist asshole. So obviously, I mean, there's no reasoning with someone like that, and he just wants to be a dictator, and
yeah, no, I mean, sort of like the reviews that you were mentioning. I guess I definitely didn't like episode 2 as much as I liked episode 1. And sort of like that was sort of the beginning where it just felt like a wrong note to me where, they run up and that guy's up on the roof shooting at zombies and you're just kind of like, why is he doing that? And then he gets in this fight and it all, I don't know, that felt a little contrived to me. Like right at the moment that Rick arrives on the roof is when this fight breaks out. And I sort of felt like I could feel the screenwriters pulling strings on the characters, Yeah, I mean, there were a number of moments in this episode that I was just, I didn't quite buy what the characters were doing. Like, when Andrea pulls her gun on Rick right away, I didn't really believe that she would do that in that situation. And then, like she has the safety on. And that sort of goes back to my question about how long has it been since the zombies appeared? Because if it's been, a month or months, which is certainly what it seems to be, like she still hasn't figured out how to turn the safety off on her gun, I mean... And where she's like, I can't take the mermaid because, that would be looting.
Yeah.
And,
there's a cop right here.
Well, and like 5 seconds after she just said this is like our 8th scavenging trip into the city to presumably, loot cans and stuff. I don't know. I don't know. It didn't quite make sense to me. I don't know. It's kind of actually the thing with the zombie smell too. Cause I really liked how gross that was, when they're chopping up the body and stuff. But I'm pretty sure even when I read the graphic novel, I'm like, I don't know if I believe that this would work. And it's kind of like a funny thing to say, like, when you're talking about zombies, like what's believable and what's not. I mean, there's no zombies that we can test to see, what would work and what wouldn't. But at least sort of my conception of zombies is that, and what makes them so scary is that they kind of always know where you are somehow, and they always show up, and they always surround any place where there's living people in it. And just the idea that you can just like smear zombie guts on you and then walk a foot away from them and they don't know that you're there. Just, I don't know, my sort of instinctive reaction watching that happen is I'm like, oh no, I don't believe that that's what would happen,
Oh, I was going to say how Shane and Lori were sort of canoodling in the woods, and I was just thinking like, wow, they must be like really, really horny. I mean, to be doing that now. I mean, seriously? I mean, come on.
Well, it's funny because that kind of mirrored one of my things I was wondering about, because if the characters have been camping out for a couple weeks, I don't know how many people, have actually spent a couple weeks, living in the woods. I have, and you get pretty tired, and sort of, dirty, doing that. And, the characters in the department store, they seem to have an awful lot of energy, for bickering and stuff. And I would sort of expect people who had been through what they've been through to just look a lot more sort of haunted and defeated and lethargic. And
well, I think the Screen Actors Guild just forbids that. It's like written in the union contract. Like, you can't make them look that bedraggled. It's like they're actors. They have to look beautiful, even if they're, living in the dirt. Definitely go check out the comic. I mean, because it's totally worth it. I mean, even if you just want to watch the show and you're not going to read ahead to see where the show's going. I mean, you should just get them and read them at some point, whether it's after the show, after the first season airs or whatever. But just get them and read them because they're really great. And I mean, the art is really great too. Like, I mean, I especially like the first trade, which was all drawn by Tony Moore, and he's one of my favorite comic book artists. So, the combination of him and Kirkman was really outstanding. And I mean, the current artist too is very good as well. Charlie Adlard. I mean, like, I've said this before, but I mean, I haven't said it on this show, but I mean, like, The Walking Dead is actually like my favorite example of zombie entertainment in any medium. So, I mean, that's kind of saying a lot, obviously. I mean, since I, between all the zombie stories I've read and all the movies I've watched and games I've played and whatnot, The Walking Dead is my favorite. So
they've made enough changes from the graphic novel that they're sort of the same story, but they're different enough from each other that I think you can, enjoy them both. I don't feel like, since I've read the graphic novel, I know what's going to happen, and every twist and turn is already predetermined. I mean, they're really mixing things up significantly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and actually, for people who are planning to pick up the comic now, we should mention too, Image Comics, who publishes The Walking Dead, is actually releasing the comic in a new weekly edition now as well. So, like, if you don't want to pick up the trade paperback editions, you can actually just get the Walking Dead weekly, which is just going to be sort of republishing all of the issues until they catch up, I guess. So yeah, I mean, you either get the trade paperbacks or you get the Walking Dead Weekly, but check it out. There's also some like sort of deluxe editions of the collected editions that are sort of like they're like a larger size and they come in like this big pretty hardcover. And if it was me just starting out now, I would probably go with those.
I guess we should also mention that if you don't have AMC, well, like I don't, you can watch The Living Dead through iTunes. You can buy the episodes, and it's $16 for high definition and $10 for a standard definition. And I guess one thing to watch out for is that they don't release the iTunes things exactly at the same time they air on TV. They seem to come out sort of early in the morning, the next morning. And so, I guess usually it's not a big deal, but, the premiere came out on Halloween. And, this year on Halloween, I was sitting at home chained to my computer because we had some technical problems with our last episode of the show, and I was furiously editing it to try to fix it. And I was like, oh, well, at least I'll get to watch the Walking Dead premiere. And then it didn't show up all night. So that was a little disappointing. But yeah, other than that, it's a good way to watch the show.
All right, well, that was our episode. Be sure to check back in 2 weeks for our next episode, and thanks for listening.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of IO9 and is brought to you by Brilliance Audio. For this episode's show notes, to subscribe to this podcast, or for more information about the show, visit io9.com/tag/geeksguide. To learn more about your hosts, visit johnjosephadams.com or davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by Slipgate 9 Entertainment. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.
I have never been involved in such an unprofessional piece of garbage. What is this crap? I don't even know what's going on. It's ridiculous.
Sorry, man.
All right.